And we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. And today, look at this.
Oh,
We have a special guest. Hello, Arthur. This is my cat,
hello,
Arthur.
Arthur.
He's sitting in the
Hi.
window. I think he wanted to be a part
That's
of the
good.
episode. So yeah,
He's
we're
watching
having
over us.
a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek, focused on the next generation, and we've made it to disaster.
Disaster.
Let me get my notes here, but I think pretty much I just kind of saw this episode a while ago. I like to be by the way, we're getting really close to Unification Part 1 and 2.
Oh my God,
It's coming.
it's coming.
It's
That's
coming.
That's gonna be a long one.
I think so. That deserves a special, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a routine day on the Enterprise D. We start off in 10 forward with a little exchange between O'Brien and Keiko and Riker. Was Riker there? Riker and Worf, I think. And their debate. They don't know what the baby's sex is. I guess they chose not to find out. Which a lot of expecting parents opt to do because, I guess, just because. And so, some people like surprises.
Some people do.
Some people do. So, anyways, they think if it's a boy that he should be named. I forget what it was, or Hero. I think I remember Keiko.
Michael, I think, or something.
Michael or Hero. That's right.
I don't know.
And we don't get to, I think, discuss what the name of the baby is going to be if it's a girl at that point. And then we go to the bridge. Oh, we cut to a scene in in one of the cargo bays, and Dr. Crusher is trying to convince Geordi to be in, I guess, a performance of the Pirates of Penzance, and he's going to play the Major General. I am the very model of a modern Major General of information, animal and vegetable and mineral. Da, 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 da. Not the first time we get Gilbert and Sullivan in Star Trek The Next Generation. In Star Trek Insurrection, or as you like to refer to it as Star Trek Erection, we get, I think also from the Pirates of Penzance, if I'm not mistaken, we get the song A British Tar. But anyways, that's going on in Cargo Bay, and then on the bridge, Captain Picard has accepted the the honor of giving a tour of the Enterprise to the recipients of the science fair, the winners of a science fair. It's these three little kids that remind me so much of, this is super personal and no one's going to understand, but remind me of the Andrews children, who I used to be their sort of like nanny, if you will, or Manny, I guess would be more appropriate. But anyways, so he's gets in the turbo shaft to give them the tour, and then all of a sudden the Enterprise is rocked and rolled and shaken by a quantum filament. Is it right? I think yes, a quantum filament, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and there's a lot of this. Nice. You're doing like, are you shaking your monitor? It's like, Doctor, say something and do that again, because it was really good. All right, so ready? 3, 2, 1.
Yes. So we're running into a cosmic string. Oh no.
No, quantum filament.
Oh, whatever.
Troi actually says cosmic string later,
yes,
and then
and
he corrects
her. Brian's like, no.
No, it's not the same thing.
It's not the same.
So anyways, they get hit by 2 actually, and the commanding officer on the bridge dies as a result of the second one. I have to say, I have to pause the summary for a moment and say that lots of people die sitting at the ops where, like an explosion happens and then you just die from it. And like, I've always been like, like Can't they do
Star
something?
Trek 2 did set that
Like,
precedent, sir.
like we have shatter resistant glass because of this in our cars, you know, like windshields don't shatter in anymore, they just kind of like crumple or whatever. And like, so I can't imagine that by TNG we don't have like some kind of solution about the ops, the operations. Like,
It's a dangerous job. What can I tell you? Star
it's
Trek
true.
2 does establish that it is very easy to die at ops.
All right, back to the
You
summary.
get
So
an explosion underneath your chair, and they can kill a Vulcan. Just knock him right off the chair.
I guess you could be electrocuted or something. But anyways,
Seriously, that was always my impression. Is that it was some sort of
electrocution, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So anyways, then after the credits, which by the way we have yet to mention, we have failed to mention, and we're like a few episodes in now.
Are you talking about
the new opening credits? There's a new opening. Yeah, there's and then Saturn, it looks like it's on fire. Like it's a little different, you know, like it's more of a futuristic look at space. So anyways, so we get that, and the opening credits, and after the break we see the aftermath, and pretty much everything's in disarray. On the bridge, they have limited sensors. They can't tell if people are alive or dead. Counselor Troi can sense that there's a lot of people alive, but she can't really sense specifically where they are. And in the midst of the kind of procedure of trying to figure things out, they realize that Counselor Troi is the highest ranking officer on duty, and she holds the rank of lieutenant commander, same as Data. And so she is in command, and she looks kind of like startled and overwhelmed, but accepts the duty and then immediately asks for suggestions. And I think she plays it really well, actually, overall, considering that she never expected to do it. But then in 10 forward, Riker, Data, and Worf have a little discussion, and Riker says that we should probably assume that the worst case scenario has occurred, and go, oh, look at this little Kiki. Hi, kitty. I think he wants to get down. He'll get down. Anyways, Riker says we should assume the worst, that there's no one left in command of the ship, and so we have to try to get control of the ship. So he recruits Data and then tells Worf to stay in 10 forward because access to medical is blocked. So he appoints him to be Nurse Worf, and take care of any of the injured that are coming in there, that they're bringing into 10 forward. By the way, we see Guinan must be off duty, or she was at a different part of the ship, because we don't get Guinan in this episode at all, and I was a little bit, I did take note of that.
Good.
And then in cargo bay, they can't actually get out. There's something wrong with the controls. And then Geordi and Dr. Crusher actually encounter a plasma fire, and it's dangerously close to some corundum that could explode. So they're racing with time in that situation. And apparently there was no Peter Preston aboard the Enterprise D because everyone evacuated from engineering and left it abandoned. And when the trainees ran, he stayed at his post. Yeah, apparently no one in the Enterprise, on the Enterprise D,
Peter Preston,
no one. Scotty's nephew, and so no one on the Enterprise D stayed at their posts in engineering. So there's a problem. There's a problem in engineering, where Ensign Rowe discovers that the containment field is collapsing, and that the one of the conduits is jeopardized by this, power conduits, and so the Enterprise could explode at any minute. So there's your dilemma. The crew gallantly do various things, including Captain Picard singing Frere Jacques to keep the kids calm. And it ends with Counselor Troi kind of making the more human decision, whereas Ro is trying to convince her to separate the saucer section to save whatever crew they know are alive, versus the ones that they don't. No one's right in this situation. It's just a matter of what can you do? And so at the end, fortunately, I failed to mention that Data uses his body to stop an electrical arc, and then Riker takes his head and connects it to the Enterprise, which I wish had the show been one of these shows where the storyline continues. I wish the next 4 episodes was Data's head just connected to engineering. It would have been fabulous. It would have been really fabulous just to have him, chilling at different op stations or control stations, with his head just connected to the starship. Or maybe his body was irreparable and the whole rest of the show could have been Data's head connected to the ship. Sort of like the 11th Doctor's Cyberman companion in his final episodes, that's connected to the TARDIS. What was his name? I don't remember the name, but he had a funny name. Anyways, they do manage to come up with a plan. If anyone's left alive in engineering, if they could put power to the stations, the computer stations, terminals in engineering, maybe someone will see that the containment field is dropping. And so Riker and Data actually do see that, and it leads to them stabilizing the containment field, and everything's all right. And they make it to Starbase for repairs. And then at the end, there's a touching moment with the children that Picard was caring for come back and present him with a plaque and expressing their gratitude for his keeping them calm under a very scary situation for children. Oh, and Counselor Troi makes a great joke when Riker kind of goads her about maybe being captain one day. She says, "I don't know if I'm cut out to be a captain, but I hear that there aren't many qualifications for first officer." So that was a little humor there. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of the episode. Did I get everything, Doctor? Oh, I forgot to say how Geordi and Dr. Crusher avert the fire. They open the cargo bay door, and it's a really good move actually. And they extinguish the fire by sucking all the air out of cargo bay.
Did you mention that Keiko had a baby?
Oh shit! I totally forgot. And Keiko has a baby, and Nurse Worf delivers it, and that's also pretty funny. And so Molly is born, and now we welcome Molly to the show.
All right, I can already predict by the fact that you did not offer me the chance to do the summary that this is going to be a very sentimentally rated episode. I already know.
You might be surprised. Actually, you might be surprised.
I already know. There's early in the episode. There's a part where I believe O'Brien goes to Troi. I don't know who to feel sorry for more, the kids or the captain, as they go into the turbolift. And clearly the answer is the audience.
Oh, wow.
Not a complete disaster as the title is called, but as it's titled. But yeah, there's I was disappointed in many aspects of the show, of the episode. I like the premise. I really like the premise. I grew up with those 70s disaster movies like The Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure, and what's the one with Richard Harris, Juggernaut? They're trying to get aboard. Remember Juggernaut?
Yes, but I don't know. I have not seen that one.
But yeah, the level. A lot of things. I think the show tried to go for a lighter tone, which is in keeping with the cheesier qualities of those disaster movies. However, I think you have to balance that with a real sense of tension and danger. and I don't think the episode holds that part up very well. I think the only scenario that was at all exciting was Riker and Data.
That was
I
a
think
cool scenario.
when Data, I mean, I think that was just a perfect mix where Data's like, why don't I just throw myself in there? And then Riker's like, what? No. And Data's like, look, it's the only thing we can do. And then Data's like, you can take my head, just remove my head. And Riker's like, you want me to take your head off? In that very, just blunt, straightforward Riker fashion of delivering lines that Jonathan Frakes has. I mean, it's goofy, but it works.
Right.
And you do get a real sense of, well, we're up against a wall. We're going to have to throw Data in there and take his head off. And then I did like the tensions between O'Brien and Ro, which, of course, would have perhaps carried over into DS9 if Michelle Forbes had accepted the role, would have accepted continuing that character into that show, which it was the reason why they paired those two characters off in the episode, is they wanted to test the chemistry, because they already knew apparently at this point that the O'Brien character was going to transfer over to DS9.
DS9, interesting.
Yeah, and then of course Ro was supposed to be, another character to go over. So this was kind of, the producers trying to test out chemistries and stuff, which I think worked very well. I mean, I think there was, a good sense of tension between, O'Brien perhaps having been more like Ro when he was younger, but is somewhat tempered now, and can take the opposing side and say, well, maybe we don't have to assume everybody's dead. But going to that point, I have to admit, I did find the level of destruction aboard the Enterprise a little alarming. I mean, they've certainly encountered it just seems like they've been...
Well, the shields weren't up. I mean, like, it is kind of like it's like I
assume the shields are always nominally up.
I mean, there's always some screens.
Degree.
There's some kind of screens or something, but this is a cosmic filament. I mean, like, who knows? Who knows? Like, but I do find it funny that, I do find it interesting that on the one hand that there aren't more situations like this in space, like especially like, so yeah, I agree with you that there's not like, but I think of it the same as like a ship kind of like, if you liken it back to the older days of exploration, it's like ships encountering reefs that they didn't know about, uncharted reefs, and it can run a ship aground for a while. It's not like a disaster, but like if your keel is destroyed, for example, on a ship, that's like quite a major repair. You're basically like stuck, what I mean? And that's kind of like the impression that I got in this episode, that they were able to get the ship back up and running and get it okay enough to get it to the nearest starbase, but it was still, for a while it was a hairy situation. But the whole engineering being empty thing is like kind of where I focus my attention on, as I mentioned in the summary. I just can't like, the engineering is usually so well staffed that there was no containment breach that I could see. Usually there's like the smoke coming out, or like, like a fire or whatever like that. Right. Like engineering looked all right, like when Riker and Data are there. So I can't. Also, the other thing is that, like, okay, fine, there was no one in engineering, and it took them like quite a while to get to engineering from 10 forward, which is understandable, but no one's in the drive section that could have gotten to it first. No one thought like, oh, we should probably like get to engineering. There could have been personnel like right next to engineering. Like, it's very feasible that, like, it's not like engineering is isolated beyond, accessibility. I mean, like, I don't know, just that to me, that was a little, as we say in certain parts of Miami that resemble Cuba, un paquete, which translates to a packet, but it just means unfeasible. Like, it just seems a little bit of a stretch.
It's a bit much.
It's a little bit much. Yeah. Before we continue with this discussion, I did want to point out real quick that we got some interesting preview images for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, where they show us the first look at kind of the interiors of the Enterprise.
Speaking of disaster.
Oh, boy. And then a crewman who's a Saurian that's on named Linus. So let me.
Does he have a?
I think that's the nickname.
Does he have a blanket?
I know, right? All right, so I'm going to show you. This is from TrekMovie.com, but this actually broke on Entertainment Weekly. Is the one that broke this? It's like I guess a Comic-Con related thing. So here is Michael Burnham on the Enterprise, like just, I guess, coming onto the bridge here. And what's interesting to me is that here in the background, those are either studio lights or it's a droid or something like that that's floating. I can't tell. So it'll be interesting to see what that thing is when we get to the episode. So here's a look at Burnham walking onto what appears to be the Enterprise bridge. And I do like that the view screen is small. Or at least it appears to be small. So maybe in the updated Discovery aesthetic, they will try to stick to and you know, and you can see the 1701 right over here, Doctor. And there are colors, red. There's red trimming in the background. So, you know, again, it is the Discovery aesthetic, the updated Discovery aesthetic, but it does look like they're trying to quote the original series in some way. And then here's our Saurian crewmen that they're going to introduce, I guess, next season. And just so you know, there's a little behind the scenes. I want that hat. And then here's the motion picture version of a Saurian. Any thoughts on that real quick before we get back to the disaster discussion?
No.
Okay, moving right along. I was surprised by this episode because I don't think I've seen it in a long time. I remember vaguely remember watching it back in, you know, its first airing, because I remembered like I definitely remembered I think like what stuck in my mind was the fire in the cargo bay. For some reason that like I was like, oh, it's that episode. You know what I mean? Like but watching it again, what I was particularly delighted about was that Marina Sirtis did a great job, I think, playing Troi in this episode, having to deal with a situation where she's kind of thrust into command. And I kind of like that. I think that, like, I don't know how you feel, but I do feel like Counselor Troi is a lot more, she fits in a lot better now than she did in previous seasons, if you will. And I know you've had a lot of complaints about her character, but you've been sympathetic to her character as well, as we've had these discussions. So that kind of stood out to me. I really like Ensign Ro, but I've always liked her, and I think that she's a great character. And again, this episode just kind of like presents her she's kind of like the no bullshit type character, but you know, as we see here, her decision, you know, wasn't exactly the most human, but she's not a human. So I think it's important to, you know, it's important to remember that. But yeah, overall, I think it was just a good episode, but I would definitely call it a filler. I think, you know, it's an episode that if we didn't get, we probably wouldn't even wonder, oh, wouldn't it have been great to have a disaster episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And then again, the only thing that really kind of I agree with you that I favored or that stood out for me was the Riker Data adventure. But that being said, as fun as it was to see all that and go through it, again, it just was a little baffling or unbelievable to me that engineering would be abandoned like that. It's such a critical part of the ship.
Yeah.
So that kind of like was a little bit of a disappointment. But as far as character moments go, that's where I think this episode really excels. And again, Troi being the standout moment, but I do like the Worf delivery scenes that I thought they were humorous, but in a way that made sense. Like Worf would, Worf would kind of like react this way, and I especially thought what was great when he's like yelling at her to push, and she yells back, "I'm trying." Um, no, it was good. It was really cool kind of scene or sequence. Again, the other thing, this time around, I just thought it was interesting that like that like the panel to put air back. It was interesting to me that the panel to manually put air back into the cargo bay was so far away from the control panel where you open the cargo bay. Like so it's just like a interesting design. I'm not saying it's flawed, I'm just saying it's interesting from a design perspective, because I would imagine that normally if such a situation were happening and the ship weren't in a shambles, the computer would just automatically refill the air in the cargo bay. Also, normally, if there was a fire, as we've seen in a previous episode, the computer actually puts up a containment field and squashes the fire that way. So it is cool that we did see, I think the cosmic filament was a great way to kind of create these obstacles, and then we have to see how you get around them manually, because it is a great point. Like as technology becomes more a part of all of our lives, one wonders, like, what do you do when it goes turned off?
Yeah.
It's like, so this was, I thought that the episode was delightful from that perspective, and it just shows that ingenuity and like creative thinking and quick thinking on your feet can make all the difference at the end of the day. One note that I took down that I thought was interesting is when Picard and the children get out of the turbo lift, and they're kind of like the children, by the way, are extremely pessimistic. I mean, they just think that they're gonna die, which I thought was interesting, because like I'm not sure that I was like that as a kid. I think personally I was like very optimistic as a kid, if I recall correctly.
Yes,
but
you were.
When Picard thank you. What, you knew me back then, Doctor. But when Picard comes up with the idea to sing a song, I thought it was funny that the girl says, "How about the laughing Vulcan and his dog?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know that one." So let's see what the internet says. Maybe there's lyrics to the laughing.
I don't think there are lyrics to the laughing Vulcan.
Well, Google Auto completes the search for you, because apparently there's an entry in memory beta, and it says the laughing Vulcan and his dog was a piece of popular children's music of the latter half of the 24th century, known to school children aboard the USS Enterprise D. When Captain Picard blah blah blah, writer Ron Moore has denied that this was a reference to Cybok. He explained, "I just like the image the title of the song conjured up." But actually, it would be an interesting thing if it were a reference to Cybok, wouldn't it? That's kind of a cool idea. And I admit I did think about that, but I forgot to mention it. So that's a cool thing. So some singer-songwriter out there, I hope you will write the lyrics and perform the laughing Vulcan and his dog, because I would love to hear that song. And that's all I have on the notes, except to say that I was very touched. by the Picard and his children thing, mainly because, as I said, it reminded me of my own adventures in Seattle with three very similar personalities to these children, and it was also similar in that it was Azure, who has been on this show. She was on the episode "The Dauphin," was kind of like the wrangler of the two boys who were one was weird a bit, can come across with these cool weird ideas, and the other one's quite logical. So I was reminded of that, and so that did get me very emotional. And so you're right, there is a sentimental component, Doctor, to this episode.
I can see that coming. Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to talk about? Anything you've got on your notes?
Well, I mean, I think the premise is a good premise. I just wish there had been more danger in the episode. I think the two best sequences, as I said, Riker and Data, that was well executed. Worf dealing with the birth of Molly O'Brien, I thought was appropriately humorous, and it worked very well. However, Picard and the kids bored me to tears. I think one of the things about Picard, we're seeing a shift. We're definitely seeing a shift now, a clear shift in Picard's attitudes towards children. The series started out with that wonderful exchange between Riker and Picard, where he basically says he hates kids,
right? And
we've gone from that to this, where he's very, when they come out of the turbo lift, he even, they kind of hug him and he feels comfortable with them, and in my experience, there are good people on this earth who don't like kids. As a matter of fact,
But I have to say, though, you're not counting that Picard has had a few experiences now already with children, and so I kind of like that he's softening up. He's still very standoffish, but
I don't think somebody would necessarily soften in that respect. I know people who don't like kids, and they're fine people, but they just don't like kids, and it doesn't soften as you get older. It hardens, as a matter of fact.
No, but you have to admit it can soften.
I think met any, to be honest. I've never met anyone who just has an aversion and the aversion and discomfort that Picard demonstrated earlier in the series. I think was quite pronounced, and I kind of like that. I like the idea that you had the captain of the Enterprise, and he kind of had this. I don't want to call it a fatal flaw, but it was a flaw in his character, and it's like every time you say, "Well, Picard, such a great character," and then there would be something that would kind of sink him down, make him more human, make him more a little unlikable. I think it was a daring move, and it was established in season 1, and I think the show just softens him up to make him more likable. But I liked him when he was more unlikable. I liked him. I like that icier, colder Picard that we saw in the first 2 seasons. I don't necessarily think that making him suddenly appreciate kids or whatever was such a great character direction for him. I think it just made him like everybody else. I mean, everybody likes kids, but
right. But I don't know that he dislikes kids, or just he finds them inappropriate aboard the ship. I mean, I think that he certainly loves his nephew.
Kids.
No, but he loves his nephew Renee, and they have a good rapport.
And that's where we see. I think we're seeing a shift.
I think it's more like Picard feels like children should be in their place, and that's where he wants them to be, and he doesn't think their place is aboard a starship necessarily.
That's not what he says in season 1.
Oh,
he says he doesn't like kids. and if you take him at his word, and if you and I kind of like the idea that Riker was that sort of buffer. He was the one that would kind of humanize the captain. He would show the humanity, and the captain kind of stays in the background.
Well, I mean, everyone else was tied up with their, they were on their chessboard in the right place at the right time, so they had to give the kids to Picard.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is it just shows a progression of the character that he does soften, and we'll see future episodes. Yeah. I know you like it.
You're saying it's wrong.
Well, I'm saying I preferred the other one. I'm not saying it's wrong. Gotcha. I'm saying it's not as interesting. I think it's very interesting when you have a lead character that challenges you in liking him or her. You know,
right?
I think it makes the character a little more interesting. I mean, obviously, it could be if it's too unlikable, then it doesn't work. Right. But I thought it was interesting that you had this captain who just doesn't, keep the kids and the families away from me.
But I think Picard. I think Picard was never unlikable, though. That's the thing, is that like there's not even had he still disliked children, it's easily forgivable. In my eyes, it's not like
but that's because you've had episodes like this, and
I'm saying had they not done that, that's not something I would have looked back at as a character flaw. I think it's just some people, like you said earlier, some people just don't like children, and I don't think that, like, as long as they don't, like, as long as they're not like, oh, we should forget having children and start cloning humans, like, to skip childhood altogether, as long as they're not that extreme, I think it's okay. Like,
I do too. I do too. But I just think I didn't like the whole softening of Picard and singing Farajaka and all that. That was just really lame to me.
I ate it up. I loved it.
Yeah, not a fan of that at all. I think Picard had an edge that we've lost, and I think we've just completely lost by this point. And
this was an excellent example of a heavy technobabble episode, by the way.
It was,
which I ate up as well. I loved it. I love that as well about it. I love the technical jargon on the episodes. We did not read from the book on the last episode, Doctor.
Oh, we did not.
We did not. Right. So I think we owe the audience, a quick little going back to Silicon Avatar, and then the book by Larry Nemecek, and the Star Trek Companion. You can get it through his website, and also I think on Amazon.com.
Okay, so you want me to go back to Silicon Avatar?
Well, just if you see anything that's like worth noting that we didn't talk about on Silicon Avatar, and then I think we can then go to this episode.
Well, in Silicon Avatar, they mentioned that the episode was written by a freelancer who took a bus down from Oregon to pitch the idea. So it shows... Star Trek Next Generation was very, I don't think it's like that today in television, but they were very open to freelancers and people just coming in and pitching ideas.
That's cool.
I mean, obviously the writer's room developed a lot of stories, but they always reserved a certain amount of episodes with the idea of like, well, let's take some pitches. Let's see from what's going on out there from the fans and stuff. I mean, professional fans, of course, or maybe not. I mean, maybe but anyways, but yeah, it was developed by a freelancer whose name was Lawrence Connolly, and I did look up. This is not from the book, but I did go online on Memory Alpha, and Brent Spiner does not particularly like the way that the episode tied up the crystalline entity storyline.
Oh,
He
interesting.
wasn't a particular fan of that. And moving on to Disaster, we have really, apparently Michael Piller was not too happy about how Ensign Rowe turned out in the episode, having to apologize to Troi. He feels that maybe she lost a bit of her edge there, or loses a rough edge.
I think it's not bad. That's an interesting thing. I mean, like, I understand where he's coming from, but I actually thought it was really great because she's really, really tough, and kind of like, again, like, for lack of a better word, like almost seeming like inhuman, like she's just like, like, let's get away from the drive section and leave all these potential people to die. But apparently the drive section might be abandoned because everyone left engineering. But I do think that I like Troy's response though, where she's like, you could have easily been right. Like, I think that was fair.
It was fair, but I see his point, whereas, they just introduced Roe. This is her second appearance on the show, and we've already shown her to be wrong. And wrong in kind of a manner in which she doesn't come off as, she comes off as rather heartless. I mean, you're right. Troi does come back and say that, but still, I think there is some, Ensign Rowe is seen as the character you don't trust.
Right.
And it's only her second appearance. So he does raise a good point. But I don't know what else they could have done. Really. I mean, I did enjoy the to and fro from Rowe and O'Brien. And like I said, I enjoyed the Riker and Data aspect of it. And even the Worf, trying to deliver the baby and looking at the thing and the pad and saying, you may push now or whatever. I thought that was rather funny. That was an appropriate amount of funny. Geordi and Crusher in that cargo bay was just boring as hell and served no purpose. I don't really feel that there was much character added to either of them at all. I mean, really, I don't know. I don't feel I really came away from learning anything more about them. I mean, that maybe would have, I don't know, maybe it would have been an opportunity to have had a situation similar to when Crusher was injured on that planet with Picard, and they had that giant thing.
I think the episode may have been overly ambitious with the amount of plot points or threads that are going on, and I bet you, I'd be willing to bet that there may have been some exposition that was cut, and when they decided where to cut it, they probably like cut from that scene, because the beginning of that sequence sets up something more heavy, with the whole like Geordi maybe, where he refuses to be in performances, and maybe there could have been some story or something about performance anxiety. I don't know. Like,
I don't know. That even that was kind of boring. And then I hate the fact that, and this is what I hate about most episodes of Next Generation that end this way. You have this cataclysmic event, and then last 2-3 minutes everything's fine. The ship is I mean, you don't even see blinking lights or anything. It's just, ship is fine. They're going to a starbase. I mean, there was physical damage to 10 forward, wasn't there? Wasn't there like a beam that came down? I mean, they should have been out there. And let me just say that I think there should be some kind of automated distress system. Like when a ship just goes completely down, where I'm assuming it's off the grid, right? Because I mean, there's no incoming or outgoing communications. But even somebody at Starfleet be like, hey, hey, what happened to the D?
It's possible,
can't find it.
but it's possible, but they might be like, I mean, as we saw in the previous episode, they were 26 hours away at like a standard, warp factor.
Hello, buoys.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but I'm saying like
Starfleet out there.
Starfleet may have dispatched like a crew or a vessel, but who knows? It could have been 30 hours, 40 hours, and even at warp like 8, it could have still been more time than whatever. Plus, like if the ship is not broadcasting a location, it's like they have to kind of speculate where it is from the last point where it pinged. So it's just kind of like, who knows like how long it is before a rescue can get underway. Remember, space is 3D. It's not like on the ocean where you have the benefit of two-dimensional thinking. But anyways, that being said, that being said, I also think it would have been interesting if we did get a situation where like maybe a Romulan vessel, like a science vessel, intercepted, and there would have been that added dilemma of like, well, here's a chance for this like, captain of a science vessel to capture the great Enterprise, but he's not quite equipped with the right tools, so he has to play a little bit of balderdash to convince them that they have more capabilities than they do. And so that might have been an interesting like twist, just off the top of my head.
But of course, as Rick Berman said, too many Romulans. I mean, following up on what you just said, then I think the ending should have been maybe a disabled Enterprise and then those rescue ships coming to the aid.
Yeah, that would have
just been something like a quick shot. Just
or
outside the Enterprise.
Or the Enterprise being towed to Starbase would have
been by the hood or something. The Osis hood shows up, and
the good old hood, right?
The good old hood, and it could have just been a captain's log. We're under tow from this on our way to.
I agree.
It seemed like the Enterprise was really. I mean, I don't. Can you think of another episode where it's so disabled without?
No, not off the top of my head. I think you're right that there were like a few missed opportunities there. So, all right, well, yeah, it's a good point. Shall we rate the episode, my friend?
Yeah.
All right. I am going to give this episode, because of my sentiment, a 6.5.
Isn't that the same rating you gave the last
episode? To me, the two episodes, the thing that's similar about these two episodes is that they're both like, they're like great in the moment, but not something I'd necessarily go and rewatch. And I think despite me being skewed to always give a higher rating, I do take those things into consideration, Doctor.
Right.
But I do think that like had it not been for some of the sentimental factors, my rating would have been a bit lower.
Okay. Well, I'm actually going to give the same rating I give the last one.
Whoa!
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5. So
I said 6.5, but you're giving it the same as the last episode, you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm going to give it a 5. Yeah. I think it's got good, it's got bad. It's not something I would run out to watch. Really, if it's on, I'd watch certain parts, but if commercial comes on, I'll switch the channel and not stay. Really,
Yeah. Favorite thing about this episode was Data's head interfacing.
That was cool.
And just Data's head being severed. It's a little bit of foreshadowing later on, again, to the season closer.
Oh, there we go. I hadn't thought of that.
Oh, I'm always thinking about that. Anyways, Doctor, this was so much fun. I'm gonna let you go, and I'm off to hopefully have an opportunity to meet the great William Shatner and maybe even Gates McFadden.
McFadden, give her a hug for her.
And Nana Visitor. And I don't think she listens to the show, but just a big LLAP shout out to Nana Visitor, because apparently she was in a hit and run accident recently where and so she's been out of communications range for a bit, recovering from that, and she made a nice little Yeah, she made a nice little announcement on Twitter saying, "Hey, for those of you who've been wondering where I've been, this happened, and I'll see you." And then she posted a nice picture of her airplane landing in Fort Lauderdale, her view from the window.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so to Nana, visitor an LLAP, and again, I really hope to meet William Shatner and Gates McFadden today. I'm very excited. I'll give a full report on our next Starfleet Boy
Please
episode.
do, and please convey to Gates McFadden that we totally were going to write a show.
If I meet her and I get to talk to her,
We're still ready. We're still ready to write Star Trek Pasteur for her.
I'll tell her about that for sure.
All right.
Well, it was wonderful as always. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time, Doctor.
All right.